Karen Ann, Anna Catalano, Diane Trineski, Wendy Pfeiffer, and Tammy Irwin. You can see each of their amazing backgrounds here. I'm just thrilled again and honored, frankly, to have them all spend time with us today. The goal is for each of them to share a bit of wisdom, and then at the end of the call or toward the end of the call, we'll have a chance for some open Q&A. So write up your questions in the chat, and we'll get into them as effectively as we can in the limited amount of time we have. So, Karen Ann, I wonder if we could have you sort of open things up. You have an amazing career. You've been on CIO roles from Mercedes to Walmart and a few others. One of the things you and I talked about in advance of this call, in your board role at UiPath and Eaton and others, you're talking about some of the realities for a CIO when it comes to really arguing their capability to be a leader of AI. And this maybe is a new challenge bar in a sense. How do you effectively take the story to the board, and what is the board looking for from a CIO?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't think it has ever been harder to be the CIO in the board context than during this onboarding of the early age of Gen AI. A lot of boards had been talking about AI as almost a technology previous to the Gen AI age. But here's why I think it's hard and a context that CIOs have got to carry with them in. The virality of GPT and how it has spread throughout a gigantic part of our society means board members are not exempt from that. And what do board members do when they want to know about something that is brand new? They talk to their other board members. The likelihood that your board members are on other boards mean that they have a very broad context of conversations of what should we be talking to the technology team about, what should we be talking to the business team about. So I think that makes it very difficult. Unlike cybersecurity, where we were masters of the universe and we would be talking about the risk associated with cyber, or when we were talking about cloud transformation or other digital capabilities that were coming in, we were looked to as
Uh-oh. Karen Ann, we lost you there for a second. I don't know if you can hear. You froze up. One of the things we talked about in advance, Karen Ann, was just the challenges in the category skill set that CIOs have, and that many CIOs perhaps are at a crossroads, I guess, in skill set. And I wonder, I was trying to kill some time here, see if she came back. Um, Wendy, let me call on you. You've most recently been CIO, and I think you have a good observational view of kind of this transition, and what that transitional skill set is that a CIO needs to bring when it comes to speaking. Oh, Karen Ann, you're back.
yeah, sorry guys. But CIOs have got to be in the board with an incredibly confident,
Uh-oh.
oh no, curiosity. You will be immediate as credible. So I think that this is something that has got to be very top of mind. Hey, and you always want to be the person with all of the answers as the technical leader. I think that the question on whether CIOs should lead the AI charge versus someone of an AI and data ilk going directly to another senior executive, if not to the CEOs, is a question which may not have been answered in your organization. And if it has been short-term answered, I don't know if it's going to be long-term answered. So a quiet confidence and one that exhibits a knowledge of the level of collaboration in order to get to AI value at scale is what people are going to be looking for first, not whether you understand the transformer model and what's happening with GPUs and the new model that NVIDIA, that is not even slightly interesting to your board, even though it's extremely interesting to all of us. I think that you have got to have a real collaborative approach when it comes to that thought process. And if I was a CIO today,
Yeah.
which I'm very glad that I'm not, and that I'm in my post-operating career. I would be really focused not on talking about governance, but talking about finding value and getting value to scale through the business and how it aligns with the business strategy. That would be my my top of mind.
Alignment to business strategy. Great. Thank you, Karen Ann. Anna, let me turn to you. In preparation, you and I talked a little bit about how to reframe maybe the conversation. And you spoke a lot about how boards are constantly looking to mitigate risk, but perhaps there's an upside view here. Could you share both a little bit of your background and then maybe dive into your suggestions on how to reframe, perhaps?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm probably the only non-tech person here on this call. I've never had a technical role. My background was in sales and marketing and international business for the oil and gas industry. But interestingly, I've served on boards for over 20 years now. And I've seen a lot of change in the boardroom in terms of the board director makeup. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, for CIOs today is the different levels of understanding of technology in a boardroom. So you've got people who are, depending on the industry you're talking to, you've got people who literally are just learning how to spell AI. And that includes some CEOs, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I think it's extremely difficult for CIOs to go into the boardroom and know where to pitch the story, because you're talking to a variety of directors. So I think the thing to consider is to understand what it is directors are concerned with. What does the directors care about most? And one of the biggest things, and part of it is what they read about, part of it is their own experience. Risk mitigation is definitely one of the areas that board directors are concerned about. And one of the problems with the technology conversation is technology as a topic entered the boardroom under the auspices of cybersecurity. Years ago, when we first started talking about technology, it was all about cybersecurity and all of the problems companies had. And so you're talking to a group of people that are first very concerned about what can go wrong. So I think to frame it up, think about putting it in two different buckets. Think about talking about AI relative to how it can help incrementalize the current business model. How can it help us do what we currently do better, faster, more accurate, get rid of mundane tasks, things like that? And the other thing to think about is, how will AI potentially change the business model for this company or create disruption from the outside? So I think those are two important buckets to think about as you're talking about this topic to a group of very, very divergent, very different directors in terms of their understanding.
So on the upside, there's some big expectations that will realize productivity, perhaps increase top line revenue, maybe introduce new market opportunities. I mean, is that, and I think maybe Karen Ann sort of described it a minute ago, which is align it to business objectives. There's some pretty big ideas here. How do you frame it in a way that's comprehensible to the board, that doesn't put you at risk as CIO? I mean, you're perhaps suggesting some big objectives. And any thoughts or best practices there?
Well, I think that some really great presentations I've heard is in the manufacturing industry, for example, how AI can improve the current business model and what we currently do better. So in manufacturing, going in and talking about how AI can monitor plant performance, and how it can understand patterns much quicker than people can, and therefore anticipate when units are going to be shut down, we're going to have problems, things like that. That's a real example of how AI can improve current business. And I think if you slowly win people over with those conversations, their concern about the risk issue becomes less, because they see it as something tremendously helpful. Then, if you're in a consumer-oriented business, introducing ways that we can better understand consumer behaviors, anticipate how they might feel based on what AI can tell us about making choices and how certain behaviors lead toward other choices. I think those kinds of that kind of data can really pique people's interest to get them off of the defensive about what are the problems that AI is going to bring to us and make them much more receptive to the conversation.
Get them off the defensive. I like that tagline. Thank you, Anna. Diane, let me call on you. You had some major roles at Disney, at Discovery, at HBO. You're now in board of director position in higher ed. How do you see framing this conversation? And are there some best practices that you've heard? I mean, obviously, you ran at a business opportunity level in the media industry, major projects, transformation sort of things. Now in higher ed, perhaps higher ed's going through its own transformation. Any sort of thoughts on best practices you've been hearing?
Yes, absolutely. And it ties back to what Anna said and Karen Ann as well. So it most definitely is a business conversation. It isn't a technology presentation. The gap I see is that too many AI discussions focus on the how instead of the why. And so, as an example, at HBO, when we launched streaming, the board didn't care about the tech. They cared about the billion-dollar revenue stream and the risk of being left behind. So that's the frame, I think, that should be used for AI, a focus on business outcomes. The opportunity for CIOs and CTOs is to translate that, and I've heard that from my colleagues here, into the language boards already used to run the business: growth, competitive positioning, operational resilience, and customer impact. They don't need another tech demo. They want to know what problems being solved, what values being created, and how those risks are being managed. So some of the best practices I'd suggest is anchor your AI proposals into KPIs that the board is already tracking: growth, margin, and risk-adjusted ROI. If AI is outside your area of expertise, demonstrate how you're building the right partnerships with internal teams, vendors, academia, or advisors. And I will say, bring governance forward. A simple AI risk framework that shows you're already thinking about ethics, compliance, security, and financial exposure can go a long way and address some of the concerns that I think people have, especially with Gen AI.
Yeah, that's huge. And you went through a pretty comprehensive list there, Diane. Is there an order of things? I mean, would you begin with a risk mitigating framework and then move into the business impact? Or, and I know this sounds a little pedantic here, but I'm just curious if you've seen how things are ordered, which gives me credibility as thoughtful, business aligned CIO, but also thoughtful about the risks of the organization.
So I think that organizations worry about being competitive and of being left behind. So I think that is one of the things you have to address in terms of benchmarking against not only others in your industry, but what has already been said, there may be adjacencies that as you are able to develop more, that your business model begins to change. So don't just look at your own industry, take best practices across other industries as well.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Wendy, thank you for joining. You and I got to know each other a few years back when you were at Nutanix. You were also at GoPro. You're now board of directors at Qualsys and Opnova. One, how's that transition gone for you? And then two, talk about some of the learnings of the skills and things you've had to develop from a financial awareness and opportunity standpoint, and how AI sort of builds into that sort of skill set for you.
Well, first of all, it's really nice to see you again. And yeah, it is quite a transition. I actually served on boards for several years before I retired from my operating career. And, one of the things I wish that someone had told me as a CIO who spoke with boards of directors is kind of what boards think about and why they want to talk to me, if at all. From the perspective of a board director, the CIO is an operator, and the CIO as an operator takes direction ultimately from the CEO. And so I'm looking for the CEO to lead in terms of describing, here's how we're going to use AI, or these are the concerns we have about AI. And then I'm looking at the CIO to follow their lead when asked to share those things. And so, I think it's important that people start from that perspective from the perspective of the board. We don't see you, CIO, as an educator
Mm,
or as a thought leader. We see you as an operator. And the
mm,
reason we do is because our job is to make sure that the operations of the company and the leadership of the company are helping to, at a minimum, preserve, but hopefully increase shareholder value. That's our job description. And so when it comes to AI, there's two effects that AI might have on shareholder value. One is it might improve productivity in some way, whether that's, maybe shortening a sales cycle or reducing headcount or cycle times in a particular area. Or it might, in some way, enhance the product, right? If it's a company that's using AI in its product in some way that's attractive to customers. The other option is it might reduce expenses in some way. And so all of those things tie back to the earlier comments about, why do boards care about technical operators? We care about technical operators because this comes from this tradition that 5, 10-year-old tradition of being concerned about cybersecurity and
right.
cybersecurity as a risk. So
Yeah.
ultimately, boards operate via committees. There's a committee that tends to focus on cyber risk for companies. It's the Audit and Risk Committee. That
Mm,
committee is mostly peopled with financial experts, and usually, in my case, I'm also a financial expert, but I am also a cyber expert. And
mm,
so it's there that a board is going to look at the risks associated with use of AI. And it's also there that a board is going to look at the productivity effects of AI
mm,
on the company. And so you're speaking to the Audit and Risk Committee. The Audit and Risk Committee is going to want to know the same things about the company's use of AI as they do about its use of technology in general, which is sources and suppliers of that AI technology. It's what data does that AI technology access? It's the
yeah.
financial implications of the
Mm,
availability or not of that AI technology, and things around reputational risk, business continuity, et cetera. So when you speak to the board about AI technology, speak in those terms and know that the recipient, the audience for that conversation is an audit and risk committee whose primary job is to think about financial considerations of the operations of the company. You're showing up as an operator, not
mm.
necessarily as a technology expert.
The financial risk acumen, I mean, what are some of the attributes you've had to sort of hone in on there in all of your experiences? I mean, it's one thing to understand the technology stack and what its costs are as an operator, but if you were committee chair of an audit risk team, you speak in different language. Is there any sort of clues you can give there on how you reframe some things?
Yeah, I think in summary, it's around the same sort of governance that areas that we might look at in a business continuity plan. It's
Hmm,
really about that. To what extent are our revenues dependent on AI? To what extent what's the sort of the blast radius of risk
yeah.
potential for some sort of a cyber risk related to AI. It has to do with to what extent are our expenses either increased or decreased based on our use of AI. And so we're not approving a large investment in AI per se, but we might be looking at the risks associated with that investment, or the risks associated with not investing to the financial status of the company.
So a much bigger, more macro view, and not just internal, not just project related, but at a macro business market industry level. Wow, that's a tall task to take on if you're not necessarily equipped with all of that. But that's great insight. Thank you, Wendy. Tammy, let me bring it to you. You and I had a chance to meet recently in this lovely event in Deer Valley, which was fascinating. So thank you for joining today. You were president of the Verizon business for a number of years. You're now on John Deere, F5, Xerox, and maybe some other boards. So first of all, thank you for joining us today. So when you think about innovation at a board level, and a CIO coming in or a business unit coming in and saying, "Hey, we have a new market," how do you react as a board member responsible, let's say, for the long-term success for shareholders and everything else? Think about these perhaps risk-taking new markets, innovation broadly. Any sort of insights there when we think about AI as an enabler to innovation?
Yeah, listen, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And I think such a timely conversation as we all, whether you're in the operating role or you're in a board role or you're in a finance role, are really wrestling with both the risk of AI as well as the massive opportunity that AI represents. And I think if we parallel it to cyber was about mitigating and managing risk. AI is about containing and managing, mitigating risk, but it's also about the tremendous upside. And as we think about kind of AI and what it can do for front of house as well as back of house, there's a lot of conversations happening in the boardroom about how do we make sure we don't miss the AI wave to take the products and capabilities that we deliver in the marketplace to really deliver a different kind of outcome, a differentiated outcome. And I think, as Diane said so well, to then measure it against the business results. And I think there's a rapid pace that's happening right now about where do you hire talent? Can you hire talent? Is it aqua hire? Is it traditional hire? How do you retain best in class talent? How do you define your strategic roadmap to the opportunities that are available? How do you think about M&A? And so this is where I'm really seeing in the boardroom. I think Wendy did a really good job of covering the risks, so I won't go there, but it really is about the upside opportunity. I think the thing we have to be really careful about that I'm seeing is I'm less impressed with big TAM numbers when people come in and say, "Let me tell you about the total addressable market." I really don't care. Tell me about how we make our business better and how we compete better for the business outcomes that I think Diane so effectively outlined. I think it's really easy to lose sight of the fundamentals. But as a board member, if you can anchor to the fundamentals of what are the outcomes for all of your stakeholders, what is the competitive threat, what is the opportunity? And there's one thing that I think really sets AI apart from some of the other technology innovations we've seen, and that is that we must move forward with experimentation versus demanding perfection. Big corporations want perfection. They want it, and by the way, boards want perfection. Like, tell me what you're going to do and make sure you don't screw it up. But it's also about experimentation so you can go fast enough to understand what the outcomes can be. And so I think it's a really fascinating time for everyone involved in it. But I will anchor back to a conversation we started with, which is kind of who leads this massive kind of transformation. I believe strongly the CIO helps to inform and educate, but the board is not going to be the technical expert in the room. They are going to guide strategy, financial outcomes, and succession planning. So they need that transition, and that massive transformation needs to be CEO led, because the outcomes are so tremendous for people, process. That means employees, customers, shareholders, and quite frankly, society at large. And so it needs to be big thinking, macro. We need experimentation versus perfection. We do need fundamentals, and we need good framework to measure business outcomes.
Wow, that's amazing. But before I open it up for Q&A, I wonder if you all could chat a little bit about, non-confidential, about CEO leadership here. And just building off of Tammy's point, I do think that sort of sets North Star when it comes to risk-taking and perfection, as you just sort of elegantly described. I mean, at some level, the organization and its leadership has to say, this is where we want to go. Have you seen that done well in a way that that we can learn from? And Diane, you've raised your hand, which is great.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Again, this is something that has to come from the top of the organization, and knowing that your CEO is embracing this, I think gives you opportunities. As I'm looking, Tammy said so well, there has to be an opportunity to experiment, and the CEO has to be willing to do that. I think there's an opportunity for a CIO or CTO to be able to create that sandbox so that you can begin to learn, but you don't introduce risk. So that's just one of my thoughts.
Yeah, great. Anna, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, I think I've seen examples of CEOs do a wonderful job of introducing how AI is being used in the organization and kind of showcasing and highlighting where the experimentation has worked, where it hasn't worked, but all the while also making sure the board is comfortable that this is being done within an environment of attention to risk. And I think that's where a CEO, as a member of the board, of course, can do a really good job of balancing both of those. The other executive, Camille, that I would say a CIO should think about looking toward for guidance, in addition to CEO, is the CFO. Because if you are a CIO who isn't super well versed in the financial side and really understands what the board or the audit committee or the risk committee looks at, going to a CFO and saying, hey, how can I frame this in a way that will be interesting in a board conversation, does two things. First of all, it gives you an ally who is in the boardroom all the time and can help you translate what it is you're trying to do into a narrative that the board will grasp. And secondly, it educates you on what it is that the C-suite and the board is really interested in these board meetings. So going to another board-facing executive and really being kind of a team going into it to present, I think, is also something I've seen very successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Karen Ann, you have a comment to add to?
Yeah, I'll just kind of take the failure modes on CEOs, because I've seen a couple. When you have a CEO not attaching what is happening with either digital transformation or AI in all of that to the business strategy and driving and accelerating the business strategy, the board becomes very nervous that you've got somebody who's looking at a shiny object. And that can really put a company off plan, because you will always arrive on time if you don't have a map of where you're going. And so I think that that's one of the failure modes. I think the second one is an overabundance of caution associated with the risk, around which no real progress on competency building or experimentation moves forward. And that is where you see chief lawyer and the audit committee actually overseeing the AI, not as AI as an accelerator on strategy. So I'm talking about regulated industries as well as unregulated industries. So I think those two things are in the hands of CEOs. And when they do that wrong, it can really put a corporation's AI progress at risk.
Now, I know this isn't unfair, but what would a CIO do to help guide that or mitigate that caution? And Wendy's nodding her head. Maybe you've got something to add to it as well. Yeah, I'd love both your input here. I mean, I'm just curious, how do you help move that forward? Are they risk adverse? And so.
co-leadership on governance, where you actually are bringing the business together to figure out what the priorities are and advance the competence, capability, and impact, is where you can bring the risk as well as the technical innovation and opportunities together. It's where you see single governance, single-threaded governance, that I think a CIO may be sitting there just saying, oh, this thing is not working right. It's co-ownership of the governance will get you there. And I actually believe in governance of business with regards to the AI prioritization, and not the technology organization or the legal organization compliance running it.
Yeah, awesome. Great. Wendy, thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with everybody, but also, look, as a CIO or a CTO or somebody with a technology leadership background, your highest good in this situation is to enable that CEO to, they're your focus. If everyone said, the CEO is the one who is representing the level of risk and opportunity to the board, and that's correct. And so I see the passion in the comments about the technology and the potential and all that. So take all that energy and enable your CEO. It's selfless work, right? You may not get the credit with the board for that expertise, but you will get budget and agency and so on if you're enabling your CEO to understand the potential and to translate that in board terms. And so my strongest recommendation is figure out your highest good in this situation. If the highest good is, yes, absolutely, to get the budget, get the agency, get the time that I need to do this thing, then the CEO is your person.
Well, yeah, great nuggets there. Tammy, please.
Yeah, listen, I dropped my thoughts into comments because there's so much good conversation and Q&A that's happening here, but I think we want to be careful not to overly complicate strategy, unlock, delivered in the business, delivered and allocated differently, but challenge the team to use it as an enabler and go faster against the mission to be able expert. I spend a lot of time reading about it, so I understand what's possible. But it is about allowing AI to be an enabler, just like so many other things that we've had as enablers to success in delivering for your stakeholders.
So in a way, simplify it in a
Yes.
sense, as an enabler, not so frightening. And perhaps people are frightened in a sense by how broad it is. Opinder, you had a question about AI governance. I opened your mic, and I'm going to open others as well. But go ahead, Opinder. Go ahead with your questions.
Thank you, Gamil. Thanks for putting together such a wonderful cast. Very, very practical advice. I must admire that. My question is around AI governance. I know too many of us are struggling with what is the right structure, who are the right people to include without, as Tammy said, without overcoming.
To impact business for governance, those who are responsible for those areas. So if this is going to be something that enhances productivity, then you're going to want those who are responsible for productivity at the senior level. If this is something that enables an IT team, or if it's something that enables HR services, et cetera, then you're going to want those who have that expertise engaged in governance, because ultimately you're governing the impact of this technology, like any other, on that area of the business.
Can I just add, follow your culture. Culture talks about how we get things done. And your culture is way different than a retailer's culture, is way different than a high-tech culture. Follow your culture on how governances have been done. And I know we haven't seen, a nuclear explosion like AI, but you have watched how things are governed. And that, when you do that correctly and you kind of supercharge those mechanisms, there is no right answer for governance except for follow your culture and the way things done. Then people pull it in and they will keep it going.
Kind of
I would
high
totally,
IQ there.
yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think that I also agree with what Wendy was talking about. I think it's really important at the end of the day that AI is owned by people who run the business. It's not all that different than if you're in a manufacturing industry and you've got a safety coordinator, for example. It's great to have someone who understands how it's done, but if it's not owned by people who run manufacturing plants, it doesn't get done. So I think that yes, go with your culture, go with what makes sense. There's no one size fits all for everything. But at the end of the day, if the people who run the business and don't own this and don't really understand how it supercharges what they're trying to do to improve their business, then it's an uphill battle for you, I think.
Can I add to that as well?
Please, yeah.
I think that technology today, whether it's Gen AI, technology in general, runs through every department, every functional area of the organization. So what has been said before me, ensuring that you have a governance that includes all of these stakeholders is going to help with shadow IT, which is a term I think is still used.
Well, we have a new one. Shadow AI now is the new term we're
I see. Shadow's never good. So if you co-opt everybody, and if all of the stakeholders can move forward together with what's right for the organization, not what's just right for one function or one department within the organization.
Great. Larry, you had a comment. I opened your mic, and then UV next.
Thank you. What a fantastic panel. You answered my first question brilliantly already. I'm in awe. One of the questions that sort of emerged from a comment here is somebody said something about experimentation and starting small. And with a tech like this, you've got to learn your way into it. And with the game changing or business changing potential of it, I mean, it may take, years and so to develop it. And so how would you recommend dealing with the trade-off between we only want to invest in things that are going to show dividends in the very short amount of time, or we want to pick off some low-hanging fruit versus, we need to learn our way into identifying what those are and play the long game here. How are boards thinking about that, the short-term versus the long-term trade-offs, and what arguments are people making that are successfully allowing sort of more experimentation to happen earlier in the game to learn into it? Or do you think that just wait for the market to mature and grab the train as it goes by 3 years from now?
I would say this also goes back to your culture and how your culture deals with experimentation. Hopefully you're not in an organization, you're not dealing with an organization that only wants successful innovation, because there's no such thing as innovation without some failures. And so I think that if you're lucky enough to be in a culture that says, yeah, we need to try things, that's great. If you're in a culture that requires a few wins to prove yourself, I think that that's something that you need to think about. There's always low-hanging fruit. There's always examples of, okay, we need to show how this improves things so that we can earn a little bit of credibility to actually step into it and try some things that may not work. You definitely need to have leadership, though, that understands that over time, AI is something that you're gonna hit some home runs, but you're also gonna strike out. If you're not doing that, you're probably not experimenting enough. But it's very culture dependent. And so if you're in a place that you need to earn some wins, go for the low hanging fruit first, be able to tell some good stories, and then go for more budget to experiment.
I love that. I love that. Wendy and Karen Ann, you both have comments, please.
So the one thing that I would add, I love that answer, Anna. The one thing that I would add is a lot of times when we are looking at proofs of concept, new opportunities, these are being done with ecosystem partners. These are being done with externals that come in. And hey, there's no shame in the fact that you do not have AI native expertise inside your organization. Welcome to the Fortune 500.
Right.
It is really a very important thing to think through the how you're paying an ecosystem partner when you're in a proof of concept that has not gone to scale versus something that will go to scale, because AI ecosystem is way different than licensing and enterprise license and those types of things. These are people incurring costs associated with modeling on your data
Mm,
or
yep.
bringing in and fine tuning their models with your data. So I think that the board is interested in how are we thinking about this emerging model, because we're being trained constantly on how expensive things are to get to scale. And finally, the experimentation gene may not be very well developed within organizations that do not have digital DNA very
Mm,
well developed over a
mm,
period of time. So when boards, if you're in a place where you're not fully implemented or at least a 5 out of 10 on a digital transformation, you may not have that experimentation capabilities. Boards are hungry for your experiments. You want to know why? Because it gives them demos,
yeah.
real-time demos that show them what is going to be possible in an A versus B situation. So
Mm,
be aware that demos are the fruit of boards' appetite for seeing something real.
yeah, that's awesome. Wendy, please.
And I just add, just have a mixed portfolio of AI projects. So, if you want something that's worthy to show to the board, maybe this is a project that is implemented with an established player, just as Karen Ann was just saying. Maybe a partner who's already implemented something like this, or a well-known product that
Mm,
will throw off dividends. Meanwhile, that buys you time for experimenting. And I can say as a board, I don't really want to know about your experiments in great depth unless they introduce significant risk, which I hope they don't, or unless they're costing a significant portion of the budget. I should also mention, though, that we're sort of talking about AI as it aids operational services here, but also AI as an enhancement to a company's core product offering or its core, what it brings to customers. That's something that perhaps at a board level we might want to wrestle over. Is it worth a significant investment to turn our product into something that's AI enhanced or AI driven? And that's a
yeah.
different conversation about capabilities.
Mm, mm, great. UV, I've opened your mic. Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, thank you. So a lot of my questions around who should be leading AI initiatives, there have been some very good responses from Anna and others. I just want to highlight one thing, which is that AI is a very horizontal technology. It applies to every aspect of a business, and not getting all of the business leaders fully immersed in understanding how to leverage AI would not allow an organization to initiate experimentation in a much parallel way than in the past. Like, many new technologies were much more valuable in certain areas and maybe less in others. But this technology has value in every area, and there's no way a CIO can, I would submit, be the center of driving everything. They need to be very supportive. They need to define what the risks are, template, how the approaches should be evaluated, and not try to be involved in every aspect of because that's when shadow AI is getting created, because
That's
people
right.
are just not waiting.
So are there answers to that? I mean, how do you bring the whole organization forward? Are there any, I mean, this is, as you say, UV horizontal, affecting everything from HR to software development and external customers and whatnot. Any best practices here to share?
Yeah, Camille, can I maybe just share
Oh, yes, you had your hand up before as well. Sorry.
Can I brag a little bit on
Please, please.
on John Deere, because I think John Deere is an example of a company who has done this very well. They anticipated the power of big data 15 years ago, and people tend to think about them as a manufacturer, but the fact is they are a big data company that is using AI to be transformative about the services they deliver to their customers. And as I've watched and been part of their evolution and really their transformation over the 5 years, they have had a very well-defined strategy of how do we win today and deliver for our shareholders while we're anticipating and building tomorrow with the expectation that AI will impact and affect everyone and everything. And as a result, I think Yuvi's question was right. It is a horizontal technology evolution. And I think back to other horizontal technology. You think about the internet, you think about personal computing, you think about the smartphone. Who owns that in your organization? Everybody owns the power of transformative technology. And I've seen that play out. And for John Deere, it has been CEO led. Who are our customers? What do they require? How can we anticipate? How do we use all of the assets and enablers? And how do we bring people along on the journey with us? And I would argue that one of the most important players on the team right now is your head of HR, your chief people officer, because all of a sudden we're going to have organizations where we've got people managing agents. And managing agents that don't actually have personalities. They might have defined personalities, but they're not real. How do you build that into the teamwork and what you're trying to unlock and enable? So I just give John Deere a ton of credit for anticipating, using the assets, viewing it as an enabler, and making it everybody's responsibility, but building it into the culture of how we serve customers better and faster.
Well, but 15 years in the running, so well done,
Yeah.
John Deere. Thank you for that. Anna, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, I think I love how the description of AI being a very horizontal function. It is very true. And as a result of that, I think CIOs have to be the ultimate collaborators. You've got to go and sit in the office of all of the different people across the organization and talk about how you can help them discover and experiment with how AI can help their business. There's literally no part of the organization that shouldn't be touched by AI, but it's going to require you as CIOs to be the collaborator, to reach out and say, okay, and by doing this, you're going to learn about their business as much as they're going to learn about AI. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity for CIOs to move outside of the functional box, to move into, you basically have license to go into all parts of the organization to say, here's how this can help your business. Let me teach me about what you do and let me help you figure this out. I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, great. Diane, please.
Building on what Anna said, I realized when I was the CTO at HBO and CDO that I was in a position, as was my organization, that had a view into every other function in a way that no other area does. And so it is important to advocate for your stakeholders and also to work together. And that, I think, is governance as well. Putting together a governance practice, because you see things that they perhaps don't see. And even marketing may see something in terms of what legal is doing or how they operate that's important to bring to the table so that everybody can be discussing it. And frankly, if you do that, people don't feel left out. And if you don't feel left out, if you feel you're part of the solution, you're going to participate.
Yeah, can I just amplify the coming age of agentic AI, where we are actually looking at task level automation and end-to-end process automation. That view that chief technology and chief information officers have at a system level of interconnectedness is going to be a massively important table stakes. One, for the systems to work together in order for the agents to be non-fragile. But that is going to be even more than this age of GPT frenzy that we find ourselves in with LLMs that are being built into products. This more pervasive agentic time is, I think, going to be a supremely important time for CIOs to actually drive and demonstrate value beyond just this kind of early hype period in AI.
Hey, Karen.
Karen Ann, how would you go about educating on that front? Because there's some pretty far-reaching implications with that from a not just terminology, but business process and ownership and to the point of a non-human interface in an environment. I mean, how would you frame some of these things?
So first of all, I don't think there's a better example of actually looking at agentic as there is inside of your IT remit. You don't need anybody's permission to go and do that. You own processes like password reset, like end-to-end ticket management, those types of things that are managed in the non-age of AI. And those elements which touch so many of the employees, one, you learn your way through how hard or easy this is going to be and what your standards need to be. And number two, you are going to be touching employees on an ongoing basis. There's no permission based in all of that. That's your gig. That's your remit on what you do. So I think that's a very important sandbox, early agentic for people to be working on. And I do think agentic is a very, very complex topic because we do not have an AI orchestrator stack yet that can be used. That's common knowledge the way the internet has in order to do that. But I think you've got to work your own processes in order to do that. I don't really know what comes after that, Camille. I think that is the place to start.
I like the idea of starting in your own wheelhouse and doing that well. Scott, I opened up your mic. Go ahead and ask your question.
I just wanted to first thanks Camille for setting everything up, and thanks everybody for the great discussion. I wanted to ask if anybody could give an example of raising up champions at the grassroots, because as a software vendor dealing with AI, brokering AI, I've reached out to my own organization to find out who was using AI in the shadow ops world and ask them to step forward into the light and start educating and being a champion, just as VCRs had champions, just as electricity had champions, right?
Yep.
The group that refuses to use electricity has been left behind. So I was wondering if anybody had examples of where you were able to reach to the internal talent pool and raise someone up to be a champion for adoption. And I'm
celebrating early adopters.
Looking to go down a path and kind of get some insight as I'm going down this path myself currently.
Great, thanks, Scott.
I'll chime in and give an example. I serve on a number of different industry boards, consumer services and all that, but I've been really surprised at the adoption in the manufacturing, in particular oil refining area. I didn't think they would be early adopters, but one champion that we had was our operations lead, who discovered a software that she presented to the board and said, this AI technology can detect minor vibrations across our plant and can anticipate downtime. And when we have downtime in refineries, that means you don't make gasoline. That means people can't get gasoline. And it's really bad news. This AI has allowed them to define when units are going to go down way before human operators notice anything's wrong. And so this was big news, and it was wonderful because it was in a very unexpected part of the company where this good news came. And it was an early win, and the entire board got real excited about it. And so we passed that threshold of we're worried about AI because of cybersecurity. So when you have examples like that, it's wonderful to win over any doubting Thomases or anyone who really doesn't understand how AI works. It was great.
Yeah, awesome. Wendy and Diane, other thoughts?
I think was the gentleman's name Kevin. I don't know who was who just asked
Scott,
that.
yeah, Scott,
Scott.
yeah.
Yeah, Scott. I serve on the board of an agentic AI company, and we are constantly wondering the same answer to that question. Right now, as an early stage company, we are getting most of our businesses coming to us from either investors or board members who are bringing this technology to the attention of their teams. And they're doing that because they're hoping for productivity gains, reducing expenses while still having the same output. And they believe that agentic AI has the potential for that, which I do as well, and Opnova does as well. And so, they're looking to get those, affect those metrics. So I would say, inside of an organization, those who have either had some productivity enhancing wins for the company, or those whose budgets are highly constrained around, people, services organizations, I think that's where your champions will come from, because that seems to be who is driving adoption of AI, even in or agentic AI, even in non-AI companies.
Great. Diane?
Marketing and promotion. In higher ed, when I was in media, they can very quickly show results of creation and development of materials that take much less time, therefore cost less. And then front of house, they can show the results of what they've created and how that has increased eyeballs. So they very quickly can show both sides, both internal and external. And to me, that's where I've seen a lot of that happen first. I shouldn't say first, but they are an early adopter.
So we're down to the last 2 minutes here. I wonder if each of you would share a perspective of what the next maybe 12 months will look like on this front, and any predictions of what you think will work and what won't work, maybe, as if you were to guide your CEO, younger CIO person in a role, let's say, into being a true capable leader here. Take it away, anybody.
I'll start.
Great.
I think, I don't know if this is precisely what you asked for, but the thing that I kept coming back to is that the most effective CIO and CTOs aren't just technologists. They need to be translators. And they need to translate AI into strategy, risk, and results.
Wonderful.
And I would
Great.
say impact at scale is coming from a very broad base of change management within organizations, getting off the fear factor, and CEOs already recognize this. That is not the job of any C-level. That is a highly collaborative activity. You want impact at scale, you want EBITDA change or revenue line acceleration. That is going to be the name of the game. Help your CEO with that on how to put it forward, and you will start seeing the real numbers start to take impact of AI inside the corp.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. Wendy?
AI is an accelerant. So like any good accelerant, you pour a little bit on and you get that acceleration. Pour too much and you douse the flame. So get that balance right in the beginning.
Great. Tammy or Anna, any final words?
Yeah, I would just say listen, learn, be a student of the business, and bring others along on the journey with you.
Wonderful.
I would close by saying collaboration is super important, and the good news is directors are getting up to speed on this topic.
Yeah.
Every day there are director programs that my colleagues are going to, I'm going to. We are becoming technologically literate, so there is hope around the corner that the conversation will get easier. So don't give up, but collaborate with your C-suite, and you will have a huge impact.
Well, thematically, Mayfield has been talking about this is the era of collaborative intelligence. So I love the word collaboration. is thematic to what we believe AI is, this enabler to so many fronts, the horizontal thesis that we talked about. But first of all, let me thank each of you, Diane, Anna, Wendy, Karen Ann, Tammy. Thank you so much. Brilliant insights. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call today. We're at the top of the hour, and I'm respectful of your time, so I'm going to give it back to you. Thank you, everybody, again for joining today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Camille.
Okay, thank you. Take care.